Hey, what's going on? Today on the podcast, my good friend, 80cc vet, former UFC veteran, a former Strikeforce champion, and currently awesome human being, Jake Shields joins us. When you're just like training and you're not really even training for a fight, you're still training 3 hours a day. Like you're still in great shape on the side. Like you're still in better than 99% of the population. So really that 6 or 8 weeks is just focused peak to get like that turbocharge button. But like, yeah, to go from like, was Nick not, without getting into any personal stuff, was he just not in a headspace to kind of be like, yeah, this is what I'm doing right now?
Yeah, I think because he started fighting at such a young age, and he was really just fight. He's a kid. He had no other options. You either make it or you're become a nobody. So I think he just had so much stress from a young age of fight, and always pressure, big fight, fame. So he just he was sick of it and wanted to step away for a while. So he completely wasn't training at all, and then he'd be drinking a little too much. I think most people know that, which I think he's went and gotten himself sober, luckily. So I think I think we definitely could see a completely new Nick. Which actually I'll talking about probably call him today. I haven't talked to him for a while, but from what I hear, he's doing way better and motivated. And I would, he could come back and tear it up again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like some of the guys that come off of like, if you haven't had like a loss that really affects you mentally, like you take that loss and you can really flip that switch. Cause sometimes you need the motivation. Like for me personally, like getting into like the gym, right? Like I have to get so out of like, I get excited cause I'm like, I'm going to eat like shit for 2 weeks. I'm going to get as fat as I can to really give myself the leverage to catapult back into it. Otherwise it's kind of like a half-hearted effort. Do you think that fight with Robbie Lawler was that for Nick, where he's like, all right, this is not how I want to be remembered in the UFC. Now I know I can do it on short notice. I'm going to go out there cause he's always going to be a fucking draw.
I really think it could. I hung out with him the next day. Since then, he went, haven't seen him that much. But the next day, he was like, "Man, I could have maybe I still could do this." I think he was kind of burnt out and was over fighting. I think the fight might have been a wake up call. Like, hey, man, maybe I still got what it takes to come out there and have a couple huge wins, a couple huge paydays. And that's really what I hope happens, because he showed he has the heart. Going out there with no camp and still going 3 rounds toe to toe with a game Robbie Lawler, who's one of the hardest hitters in the sport. It just shows he has the fight in his heart, even though he wasn't prepared at all. So, I mean, I think it's a wake-up call for him, but it's, Nick's enigmatic characters everyone knows. So even people that are close to him, he's still a guy that you never quite know what he's going to do. He's been a complete wild card, even for the people closest to him. I remember Caesar would call me and be like, Jake, make sure he comes to this press conference. So I'm just like, Caesar, I don't control him either. Nick's not really, he's not a guy that anyone control. What do you want me to do? I can try to tell him, but the more I push him, the less likely he's to do it.
That's funny. Speaking of fighting on short notice, when you started training with Chuck Liddell, I think it was that was your first formative MMA training, right? Back in like '99. You took your first fight only a few weeks later. What the hell was that like? I know one of your teammates dropped out, but how did you decide, hey, I'm training for a couple weeks. How hard can this MMA thing be?
Yeah, I was not the brightest young kid probably. And things also, then it wasn't, sport was still tough, but it wasn't quite as professional back then. There was guys training from like single disciplines, and I had a big wrestling background. So it's not like I was completely brand new, because wrestling, is a martial art. So all the years wrestling, and then, I was at a fight watching a guy popped out, and I was just like, yeah, fuck it. I'll jump in there and fight. And, when I'm sitting there back there, jump in, tape my hands, I'm sitting there and be like, what did I just volunteer for? Why did I just volunteer to fight? But too late at that point.
Was that even, was that sanctioned at the commissions, or was that still kind of where it was like,
it was not sanctioned? Because the time I started fighting, it was illegal in most states. We could only fight. We had to go out to Indian reservations. That was the only way we were able to fight back then.
That's fun. Did you go
out there? It was pretty much free for all. So some of them was just, some of the shows were ran professionally if it was promoter, and some of them were just like anything goes. Pulling people out of the audience. There was one where I saw some big fat girl fight a man. You're like, at first you're like, oh yeah, this is interesting. And then you watch it actually happen. You're like, oh man, this is why men and women shouldn't fight. First the crowd's all pumped up, then they change real quick when the dude starts beating her up. You realize, okay, this isn't good.
That's not. Oh geez, man, that's great. Speaking of women and men beating each other up, you posted something the other day that on your Instagram about like the 2 transgender athletes, and like we've had a few transgender athletes. Like I think you do whatever you want in your personal life, but I definitely think that it's crazy to think that there's not a distinct advantage of a male's body physiologically from birth, getting all those testosterone and the way you grow in muscles and bone density. There's a huge difference. Do you think that there is going to be a time where we see more transgender athletes cross over in the MMA space?
Unfortunately, probably, yeah. Like you said, I mean, it's a huge advantage. It's insane that we're allowing this society and acting like nothing's wrong with it. just like you said, I have no problem if someone wants to be trans. If a guy wants to wear a dress and, call him a girl's name, I'll do that and treat him. If he's respectful, I'll be respectful. I mean, to her, I'll call him a her if he wants to be respectful. But when you start saying you're actually a female and actually going to compete against them athletically, it's just, it's screwing over women. And that the weird part is watching some of these feminist groups push this, they're screwing themselves. And it's a strange thing to watch. But I've noticed when I've spoke about it, like in Twitter and stuff, I have a ton of like men get angry at me, but the guys that get angry are always these really weird looking, weak beta men. So I think they're guys that have never played sports. They don't realize how much stronger they are than women. And it's almost like they might be guys that like have hatred toward women. It's probably guys that women reject. So it's almost like maybe they're enjoying watching women get punished in sports.
Yeah, it's not that right, and I think that's the caveat too. Is that it can be viewed two ways. It can be viewed as like it's not that we're putting down the transgender movement. It's the opposite. It's that like you're not really being fair to these athletes, these women that sacrifice and compete. And it's kind of like taking steroids as a baseball player. It's a shortcut. Like look, if you're competing as a man or a woman, you're putting in the hours of blood, sweat, and tears. But you have a distinct advantage from a physical point of view, for the most part, like men fighting women that we've seen, like MMA. I mean, stuff like that. I forget the African American chick's name that competed, but I mean that's tough. But you put up that meme with the two female finalists were both the transgenders.
The first and second were both transgendered. It's like that just shows you the difference. And these were, I'm sure when they were men, they were probably like B level, and they switch over and start dominating. It's just clearly unfair. And the reason this one hits home to me is being an athlete. I dedicated my whole life to sports. And I feel so bad for these women that have dedicated their whole life to these sports. And as someone, because I know how serious it is. People are like, oh, it's just sports, but we take this very seriously. It's how we make a living. It's like comes our whole life. And for someone to just come in, switch over, become a girl, and start dominating you. I also have a daughter who played sports. It's not fair to women. People try to act like, oh, you're being a bigot and anti-trans. It's like, no, they're coming in and screwing over real women that are working hard.
Yeah. I think it's a crazy time, man, we live in. So when you first started training, you were a 2-time junior national college wrestling champ. You had a lot of wrestling accolades like you talked about. Then you got into jiu-jitsu. At what point did you decide that fighting was a career that would be a viable path for you?
I was addicted to it right away, but there wasn't really much money. I was like, oh, maybe open a gym after something. So I was doing it and not seeing much money for a while, but I knew I wanted to do it for a while. And then I started seeing, Chuck Liddell being one of my really good friends and mentor. So I seen him start making pretty good money, or I was young and broke, what I thought was good money. He'd probably make like $50,000 a fight. And I was like, oh, you can make real money. You get a little older, make a little money. You're like, oh, okay. He wasn't making much money, but at the time it was like, man, this guy's making bank. Maybe there is a career here. So I saw that and just started, taking it super, super serious. And then luckily, as I went along, the money slowly kept going up.
Obviously like the UFC and the MMA space has made a bunch of leaps and bounds in terms of like USADA testing and even like being more flexible with things like I forget who it was. It was Nick or Nate got popped for like, I think it was Nick got popped for like medical marijuana. Yeah. And it's like, give me a fucking break.
It was some weird, like, I forget what it even was. It was something that was so obvious. Everyone can look at Nate and knows he's never done steroids. He's been anti-steroid. It was something that was weird, like in a supplement. It was like such a trace amount that would have zero performance enhancer. I forget what the product was. I think it was something I've never even heard of, but it was like some weird thing. I think there's been a few people pop. So boxers and stuff popped with it too. Apparently it's like food and supplements.
Yeah.
And I think originally a couple people actually got suspended and didn't get their suspensions pulled over the same supplement. I can't remember what it was, or the same thing. But then eventually I think Nate was the one where people were just so like, man, this is ridiculous. So now they started, if you have a tiny trace, because it's such a small amount that has no performance benefit, but happens to be in some supplements and stuff. So it's not fair for a athlete to get nailed from something, when amount is too small.
Yeah.
And that's why it gets tricky. We definitely want to catch the cheats and get them out of there, but we got to be careful not to, suspend people that legitimately aren't on stuff either.
That's why I see like everybody that came over from Pride. Because I mean, I think we can all, the general consensus, we agree. Everybody in Pride was pretty much juiced to the
probably
heels.
Like 80% at least was on steroids.
Yeah, the ones that won any fights were on steroids.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I can tell you, Rogan's talked about it. He was there with like when I actually sat down with Joe and Eddie and Saki Abara, and they were talking about me potentially fighting Sakuraba, and he's like, oh, you just use steroids. Like very blatant, just you should get bigger. Just use steroids. Like it was so they didn't care. I mean, there was nothing in their contract. Yeah, it was it's a different place. But like whenever those guys came over here, like I mean, I think it was Shogun fought when Shogun's let's see, it was Shogun's first fight, and he fought Forrest Griffin, and everyone's like, oh, Shogun's gonna crush him, and I was like, man, he's not on the sauce. He was not on the sauce, man. That it does make a big difference. But that's the same thing kind of with men and women, like that extra testosterone that plays a huge factor. It's effectively like being on, and you can say, well, we're taking estrogen and stuff like that, but what about the other 30 years? It's crazy.
They're still gonna have more bone mass, more density. They're still gonna be stronger. Doesn't matter. You can put me on estrogen for 2 years. I'm still going to be able to beat up women. It's just the truth of the matter.
So, you talk about like when you first started fighting back in the 90s and stuff. I mean, those were, not only were they horribly regulated, if at all, but the money was a couple $100, and then you start making some money. As a parallel, the jiu-jitsu space, which you've been exceedingly active in both lately and even before, like, I think just in the past several years, talk about like, guys being able to make, I mean, I've never heard of a guy like Gordon Ryan he's a millionaire from jiu-jitsu. Millions. That's crazy to think.
Yeah, it's amazing because there's not a lot of guys becoming millionaires in jiu-jitsu, but the fact that there's a few, because I remember originally in fighting, it was the first when there was first couple fighters become millionaires. It's like, that's awesome. And it's, there's a decent amount of guys that can make decent living in jiu-jitsu because there's matches. There's not like a fight too, where you can only fight a few times a year. I mean, a lot of these matches, $5,000, but you could like do one almost every weekend. And there's tournaments that are paying, $50,000 to win. I mean, guys like Gordon, I'm for sure he's probably getting like $30,000 a match, or who knows, maybe even more. But he's the best in the world. So they're starting to be, again, not crazy money, but you can get paid a little bit for it. And like, a lot of jiu-jitsu guys, they'll do a match, they'll go to a seminar in the same town. Some of the guys can teach a little. So there's definitely starting to be a path towards a good living with jiu-jitsu. Plus with BJJ Fanatics, which I actually have, tapes on there as well, selling our instructionals. That's a good extra cash coming in. Just, you film a couple of these instructionals and then you have money coming in steadily monthly from the videos, which that's where, Gordon Ryan, I think he's got the biggest selling instructionals. Him and John Donahere, that's where he makes the majority of his money.
Yeah, and he's like, and he can do a seminar every week if he wanted to too. I mean, like he's constantly traveling doing those seminars. He did some with Tom DeBlas. When what was the catalyst to make you go train with John Danaher? Was that like because of one of the guys, or because of John or GSP, or how did you end up over there?
It was a combination of things. I would travel out to New York and I love the city, love the energy there. And it was like, I was getting kind of sick of San Francisco because I'd been there so long. And then, our team, amazing team, but we weren't all meeting as much to train anymore. San Francisco, the scene had kind of fallen apart. And then, I went there, and John was an amazing teacher. And then it was kind of early on when his team was first forming, we had, Gary Tonin, Gordon Ryan. They were like, I think Gordon was only purple belt then, but obviously insanely good purple belt. There was this guy, Eddie Cummings. It was such a good little tight team. It kind of felt like the old scrap pack days when me, Nick, Nate, and Gil were pushing up. So it just it felt good to go train with these young guys. It was so technical, learning new stuff, and a combination of loving New York City. So I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna come out here and live for a couple of years and check out this new style of jiu-jitsu that John Donahere is pushing.
What do you think is like the main difference between training with guys like, I mean, some of the best in the world, Gilbert Melendez, Cesar Gracie, and then training at a spot with like John Danaher? What makes him so different and so effective?
I think John is really good at studying tapes and being creative and combining stuff together. So he does invent some moves, but a lot of it is he's just combining and making things more systematic. And he's really good at teaching it. So he'll kind of look and figure out how things are done, how to combine them, how to combine jiu-jitsu and wrestling. So he'll watch a lot of these Iranian wrestlers and Russian wrestlers and figure out ways to mix it with jiu-jitsu. So maybe he's not inventing a new move, but he's finding ways to combine them and stuff better. So it's extremely innovative way of pushing things. And I think he's also really smart. He watches his athletes a lot and watches us train and then readapts how he does his teaching. So he might be trying to teach something, maybe whatever reason we're being idiots and not getting it, he might try to teach it different the second day. He learns how to adapt, and maybe you can see something he's trying to teach that we're just not sticking, and maybe he'll pull away and push a different direction if it's not working. Or if it is working, keep pushing it more. I think he's just always watching, paying attention. Because he's there every day training or every day coaching. And a lot of times, I'll coach, then I usually train. So I don't have to watch the athletes. He sits there and watches every athlete so we can see what we're doing and make adjustments.
That's great. You said that when you first met Gordon, he was like a purple belt and was early on in the day. At what point did you train with Gordon and you start to realize that he's just not, because Gordon Ryan wasn't Gordon Ryan until he really became Gordon Ryan, right? So like he was just another guy in the room doing well for a while. At what point were you like, man, this kid is something special?
Pretty early on. It wasn't the first time I trained with him. The first time I trained with him, it was like, okay, this kid's really good. but it wasn't like, wow, this kid's going to be the next level. You know, it was like, wow, this is a good, it was, wow, this is an amazing purple belt. But then I think within like, you know, a year or so of training with him, might even before I moved out there, he just started excelling probably when he got his brown belt. And it was just like, wow, this guy's like starting to tap out of elite black belts. He started giving me like just hell in the room. And he's, you know, he just started getting better and better. I'm like, man, this kid's getting good. He's going to start smashing people. And then within like a year past that, he was just manhandling people. You know, I think so. Right before he started winning the EBI is when I started realizing, oh wow, this kid's good. Remember when he went into EBI, I'm like, I think this guy's gonna win it. He's the real deal. And he progressed like really quick. It went from, oh, this is a really tough purple belt that give me good rounds to, man, he's tapping everyone in the room.
Yeah. I remember when I saw a similar situation when I was there when Gary Tonin fought Aoki overseas in Singapore. And I wasn't like a super jiu-jitsu nerd at the time. And so I wasn't like familiar with who Gary Tonin was. Obviously I knew who Aoki was. Yeah. And I vaguely heard of the name Gary Tonin. And actually, what's his name? Our Greek friend that I can't even think.
Oh, Denny?
Yeah, Denny was out there too. Yeah. And he's like, man, he's something special. And I got to give Denny credit. He goes, he's going to like heel hook him in like 7 minutes. And he heel hooked him in 7 minutes. And I was like, that's pretty insane.
Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, like, he's such a talented cat, man.
Yeah, and he's one of the most fun guys to watch too. I don't know if there's anyone more fun to watch than Gary Tonin because he's so athletic and explosive and so technical. So it's rare when you have someone that's both. Like Gordon's extremely technical, but he's like slow and methodical. He's not explosive at all, which that's actually so impressive that a guy with like not traditional good athletic abilities become the best in the world. But Gary has more of that explosive, exciting. So he's jumping into heel hooks, jumping into exploding triangles. So he's one of the most fun, if not the most fun, jiu-jitsu guys to watch. And I think it's a shame he's not a bigger name in the U.S., at least in MMA. I think in jiu-jitsu he's a huge name, but MMA he's hardly known of because he fights over in ONE FC. But he's a phenom, and I expect big things out of him.
What like how do you gauge your own outside looking in? Do you consider yourself more of a methodical, explosive? How would you quantify your style?
Yeah, I'm definitely not super athletic, unfortunately. So I always had to slow things down, be more methodical with approach, get the clinch. I was never able to, do giant shooting explosive doubles and jumping triangles and all that. I mean, obviously you can hit some of it with the technique, but it just wasn't gifted with that natural athletic explosion.
Yeah, speaking of athletic explosions, so a guy like I had Nicky Rodriguez on, and we were talking about how he kind of got started, and he I think is an outlier. He's super athletic, and he'll even say like he just outworks a lot of guys. But 2 weeks into training, he was doing a competition, which these aren't high level black belts, but he was still going to like local events, beating black belts. Which when you first start training jiu-jitsu, it would be unheard of for someone to walk in and beat a black belt. What's your experience been like rolling with a guy like of that athleticism?
Dude, he's a complete freak athlete. And was he probably 240, 245? I mean, I haven't trained with him maybe in like 2 years, but he was right away. He was really good. Had a lot of holes in his games, of course, so I could find little holes, but he started closing the holes really quick. So as he came in, he just, he progressed within like a year, 2 years, whatever. He was a complete phenom. He was so athletic, got a ton of work from John, and then, Gordon all the time would need him for workout partner to wrestle. So he spent a lot of time with him after the training, one-on-one on the mat. So he progressed so fast. Someone that athletic, someone like Gordon helping you every day, you're gonna get good quick.
Yeah, that's crazy that they split. Without getting into the craziness of that, I think that Nicky Rod said that obviously he trains every day because he wants to beat Gordon because Gordon's the best guy, which makes sense. Do you think that's a matchup? Because you've seen those guys roll, in the gym. Do you think that that's a matchup that Nicky could surprise the world, or do you think Gordon's got his number?
It's just it's hard to say. It's the Gordon I saw, was beating everyone at that time, but you never know what they're training. Does Gordon have the training partner trying not to push him? Because it's he said the split's very unfortunate because it was, I'm friends with everyone on both sides. So for me, that was terrible to see. And I had no part in the split. So it's terrible seeing that. And you hear, talk to both sides. And to me, it sounds like they all could have just sat down and had a good talk and worked it out, to be honest. But at this point, I think it's too late when you get, grown men, their egos come in, and it's like it's really hard to get guys to go back and be like, what, maybe we could just sit back and solve this. So it's, now it's gone too far, but really, I don't think no one really seems to be that big of a bad guy on either end, the way I saw it. And it's, but back to the question of Gordon, like he's not going to be easy to beat. I'm not saying Nicky Rod can't beat him, but Gordon's my favorite against anyone.
Speaking of anyone coming up, he's got that super fight with Andre Galvalo. Do you think that Galvalo's, if there's anyone that can beat him, do you think he's in the top 5?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, that's an exciting match, and everyone wants to see. I think the slap, the slap heard around the world adds to that and made Gabal come back out. But if anyone could beat him, it is Gabal, because he is not easy to tap. He's extremely strong. He appears to get in amazing shape. He blasts through people. I think that's going to be a tough, exciting match, and the bad blood just adds to it. I mean, the fact that Gabal's got to hate him, because he came to his face and slapped him, and that was I like Gaval, so I don't want to knock him, but that was hugely, hugely humiliating for him to get slapped because he's the one that approached Gordon. It'd be different if Gordon came up and bullied him, but Gaval ran in Gordon's face talking crap, and then Gordon just smacked him. He backed up, then he came for the second time and got slapped again. So it wasn't a good look for Gaval. Like I said, it'd be different if Gordon just ran up and slapped him, because Gaval was the aggressor to got slapped and walk off, made him look bad, and I'm sure it was hugely humiliating in Brazil. So that's why, or I assume that's why, he decided to take the match.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised that with the split and stuff, just not really surprised, but with the split, it seems like a guy like Nicky Rodriguez would be a great training partner for someone to train like Galvao, because they're both so explosive, strong, and top pressure game. I wonder who Gordon is really training with, because you made a good point, especially at the high levels. Like when you're in that top 1%, even the top 1% of the top 1%, it's hard to find training partners that can push you. Your ego, right, sometimes wants to be the best in the room, but that doesn't make you better, right? You got to have those guys that you can try technique on, and you got those guys that you can get worn down on and exploit and get better at too. How hard is it to find that when you're at the top level, when you're leaving schools and stuff like that?
And it's really tough, even for me, it's really, really tough being one of the best in the world. It can be certain places I go to where I just can't get guys to push me. And you look at Gordon, he's probably weighs 220. So he's a heavyweight, and he's literally the best jiu-jitsu guy in the world. So to find training partners, because he's bigger, to top it off, so it becomes almost impossible. So it's, but sometimes you can progress and get better when you don't have good training partners. Sometimes I made my biggest bounds is when I had no training partners. I had guys who weren't that good, and I was experimenting, trying new things. So that's the flip side to it. But, for Gabao, it would be nice to get some big training partners, especially, like I said, Nicky Rodriguez. He has, Craig Jones there to train with every day. Before Gordon had Nicky Ryan and Craig to train with. Now he's missing those two great workout partners.
Yeah, you've been a vegan for a long time, right?
I'm vegetarian, so I eat eggs and cheese. But yeah, my whole life.
Is that more plant-based, or is it ethically? I didn't know there was a difference for a while.
Yeah, well, I grew up vegetarian. My parents vegetarian, so for me it was super easy. I never really gave it much thought. The few times I ate meat, it made me kind of sick, and I felt kind of gross by it. And I just I think ethically it is, especially factory farming, it's disgusting. And I think if you grow up eating meat, you never even really think about it, or it doesn't cross your mind. For me, the few times I eat meat, I kind of think about it oh, should I be eating this? And I don't feel good, mentally and physically eating it. So I just never started doing it.
So you really don't have anything to compare it to, because a lot of people, I watched a couple of documentaries on Netflix, like Game Changers and what was the other, What the Health, and subsequent to watching both of those, the sentient and I like to think intelligent Jason's and it truthfully wasn't, full transparency, wasn't an ethical thing. It was solely hey, you're stupid to smoke cigarettes because of X, Y, and Z. You're stupid to eat meat because of X, Y, and Z. And I tried to be vegetarian for a few months, and I would be. Then what happens is I'm just eating a bunch of pasta, getting fat, out of shape, and I know 3 meals to cook. So it's been
it's tough.
But you grew up that way, so for you it's just easy.
For me, exactly, it's super easy because I've never eaten it, so it never even really crosses my mind to be as an option. Because there has been a few times where I've switched to vegan for a few months, and it's the same thing. I'll be vegan for a while, and then it gets hard, everyone's out, they're eating pizza, and I'm oh, it's just easier to do. So it's 100%. I'm the same with you. So that's why I understand. I'm not one of those vegans. It's or vegetarians. It's always trying to guilt trip people oh, you should switch over. Because I understand how hard it is. Because when I tried switching vegan, I saw how hard it is. And it's especially going vegan, cooking the right food, you have to actually make a huge effort to get the right protein. So there was a time when I was went vegan for a few of my fights, but I had to hire a chef to get the right protein or the right proteins and meals. And that obviously gets expensive if you're having a chef come and cook for you.
I know when your first 4 fights, I think were at 185 pounds. And then when you decided to really go serious, you got down to welterweight. Being vegan, did you have to cut a lot of weight? Because some guys were cutting 15, 20, 30 pounds in a few days. Was that ever a concern for you?
Weight cuts are always pretty easy for me. I walk around 185, so that's considered a pretty small. Some of the 55 pounders are bigger than me. It's the funny part. Sometimes I train with 55 pounders and they're way bigger than me. So it's a pretty easy cut. But again, I always did cut at least 10 pounds of water before. So the water still sucked because I would never overcut to the last minute.
Yeah, that I think that the UFC's had some they've changed things. I'm not sure, but like in terms of like how much water weight you can cut anymore. Don't they have some sort of barometer now where you can't cut more than like, because some guys were cutting so much weight. I mean, people die. I mean, ONE FC had
Yeah.
guys die from that. It's crazy.
I know they check your water and stuff. I don't think they have any official rules on it. So it's kind of like they'll encourage you, like, hey, this is too much. But I'm pretty sure they actually don't pull fights.
Mhm.
They may have like 1 or 2 fights when guys are just like so insanely heavy. I think maybe they bumped it up to catch weights and stuff. But overall, I don't think they have a set criteria like ONE FC has.
So going back a little bit to some of your earlier fights, and even before that, when you first walked in, I mean, that room evolved into, I mean, you guys were all at the top of the food chain at one point or another. Nick Diaz, Nate Diaz, yourself, Gilbert Melendez. Oh my gosh, and I can't think of the other.
We had other guys. We had David Terrell.
David Terrell.
Absolute killer. He fought for the title. We had Gil Castillo also fought for the title. So we had a ton of good guys. And the cool thing, that gym was completely organic. A lot of gyms nowadays, the super gyms, guys recruit, people move there. We all just kind of started randomly training there together and all pushed and all, fought at the highest level.
Was Nick and Nate there when you got there, or did they come subsequent to you coming?
I think Nick maybe came like just right before me, maybe like a couple months. So he was like the really tough, scrappy new guy. And I came in, and me and Nick used to just go in and go at it, because he was kind of like the tough new guy. David Terrell was way better than me at that time. He would just smash us both. So me and Nick would kind of go in and try to beat each other up. And then one day I brought in Gilbert Melendez. And then that's when Nick's looking like, well, Jake brought this guy in. So he made his brother come with him, I think, the next day. I don't think his brother really had a choice. He didn't really have much either. So I ended up, got in a fight with my baby's mom and moved just randomly. He was my college buddy. I'm like, I'm going to stay at your house for a couple of days. Next thing I know, I didn't move out for a couple of years. So I just started making Gil, hey, we're going to train. Nick did the same with Nate. So I don't think those two really ever had a choice. We kind of made them become fighters, but I doubt they're too angry at us, because they were both quite successful.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, in all of you guys have had a tremendous amount of success, which is crazy. Did you? I mean, you went on a streak. I think it was 6 years before you ended up. You had like 15 fights you won in a row before you lost the GSP. Which, I mean, that's everybody loses the GSP. Have you got a chance to train with him subsequently at Danaher's at all?
Yeah, I've actually trained with him quite a bit, became friends after, and it's kind of cool with the guy, because he's always a guy I had a ton of respect for, because he was, the best welterweight in a while. That's why I wanted to fight him. That's why I signed with the UFC over, took a pay cut from Strikeforce to go fight in the UFC, because I wanted to fight GSP, because I had respect for him. And we became friends. I've actually gone up to Montreal a couple times. I hung out with him. We trained quite a bit. So it's, he still trains all the time. He's a true martial artist. Even though he's retired, he still trains every day and trying to get better.
Do you think someone like GSP, like you look at the how Nick was not in a headspace to fight, and then for whatever reasons he ends up being compelled to take this fight on short notice? Do you think if GSP got a call today and got the right fight, the right offer, that in 4 weeks from right now he could be competitive?
100%, because he, like you said, we were talking about, he hasn't fought in forever. He's still training every day. So his body, he's out there training with elite pros. He goes into, TriStar, and I'm sure he smashes like all these dudes getting ready for UFC fights, and he's just in there dumping them on their head, beating them up still. So it's so he's still in that peak fight shape, so he can be ready really quick. And I know he really wanted to put a fight together with Khabib, and Khabib really wanted the fight too, but unfortunately Dana just didn't want to quite make that happen, and now they're both retired.
Why do you think that is? Because the UFC has always needed stars. I mean, the downside of the sport, right, is like, unlike basketball where you can be the reigning champ for several years. Like, you remember there's that story about Pettis, who was on the Wheatie box. By the time the Wheatie box came out, he wasn't the champ anymore.
You're losing, yeah.
Yeah, why do you think that didn't come to fruition? Because I've heard that, and I think that that's a great fight.
Yeah. Oh man, that would have been possibly the biggest selling of all time. Because that would have brought in the old school fans, the new school fans, obviously the Russians suffering turn in, the Canadians are fanatic. Not that many Canadians, but they're fanatic for George. And as far as why it didn't happen, I'm just speculating. But I think after George moved up a weight and beat Bisping for the title, he was supposed to defend the belt, and then he kind of stepped away because there was no mega fights. I think it really pissed Dana White off. So he's kind of like, well, you're just going to come in. If you beat Khabib, you're just going to step away and fuck me again. So I'm pretty sure that was the issue. I think once Dana saw Khabib was thinking about retiring, he should have offered him a fight, because I think that's the fight that would have brought Khabib back. Because I believe it was Khabib's dad was like really loved GSP and wanted Khabib to fight GSP. So I think that might have been the fight that would have brought Khabib back, but he didn't offer. As far as I know, it was never offered to him. So the fight didn't come together.
Yeah, I was just talking to someone the other day. I was talking to Cheech, our production coordinator, and
Mhm.
there's that one time that like by every measurable metric, everyone likes GSP. He's a nice
Yeah.
guy. He's a gentleman. He truly is a martial artist first and a fighter second. He's not one of these
Mhm.
just roughnecks who just wants to fight, right? So like it's funny because he has that very famous line with after the Matt Hughes fight that I was not impressed with your performance. I'm like, you don't understand how painful that was to listen to because he's not. That's not him. Like he's
No,
for
yeah.
sure. That's like that's a gun to his head. And if you just did a split screen of like a Conor McGregor shit talk session, and then the best thing he could work up was,
Yes, I'm
I
not
was not happy
Chris.
with what you have done here. I'm sorry to say this to you. Like like
So,
he's
so, someone probably pushed him to say that too. So
oh
go
for
out there and bash him
sure.
from the
I think
UFC or something.
I think that's what I heard is that Dana was trying to, or someone in there was trying to was like hyping, like, you got to sell this fight, man. Go in there, say
Yeah.
something you're comfortable with, say something, but like, I'm not
Mhm.
impressed with your
I'm not
performance.
impressed. Yeah,
That's like
no, you're
that's
right.
that's
Never
almost
asked
a
about that.
compliment. It's almost like it's like, well, thank you, compared to some of the other stuff. Let's talk Conor McGregor for a second. I mean, you've been in the sport forever, and you've seen guys kind of go up and down through these peaks, and you've experienced these highs and lows yourself. A guy like Conor McGregor, for me personally, when I've seen guys like the Randy Coutures, the Gina Carano's, who had a lot of hype, a lot of success, they get into the sport. As soon as those other, you become like this center of attention, and then you have not only sponsors relationships you have to deal with, you have movie options, you have so many more things pulling at you that it can be distracting. Do you think that we're going to see Conor McGregor 2.0, or do you feel like his ship is kind of sailing at this juncture?
I mean, anything could definitely happen, but if I had to guess, I would say I feel like his ship's kind of sailed. I think he got so mega famous that he kind of lost the. Probably, I'm sure he still trains, but probably not that same hunger. When you have that kind of fame and money, it seems a little distracted. I mean, guess like maybe. I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but quite possible he has a drinking and possibly drug problem too, with the way he seems to party. So I would actually, even though I was never a huge Connor fan, I would love to see him come back in top form. That would actually be the best comeback story. Even though I was never a huge Connor believer, I still think it'd be great to come back there and look at his peak. I think part of the reason he got so hyped is he is a great fighter, but part of it is when he wins, he looks extremely flashy, and he's a great shit talker. But I think he always had holes. He always had big holes in his grappling. But when he wins, it's usually within a couple minutes because he comes out there just so explosive right in the beginning. So when he wins, it looks like he's unstoppable.
Yeah, there's I've always said there's really two like routes to become famous, right? Fighting. You can either be the Kale Sonnen, where you're not necessarily the best in the world, but you can talk really good. You're great on a mic. You can hype and sell a fight. You're a Tito Ortiz-esque, or you guys like you, GSP, where you're just going in there and you're not going to go sit there and tell them that I'm going to go bang your mother, but you're just going to constantly win. And whether people want to see you lose or not, they're just like, man, this guy's fucking, he's a murderer. Like, he's tough. And when you got a guy like Conor McGregor, who's constantly winning and can talk shit, I mean, it does thrust you in the limelight. You said you weren't a Conor believer. I wasn't either for a long time, admittingly,
Yeah.
until I watched his fight. I was there in a third or fourth row when he fought Jose Aldo, and I was completely wrong.
Yeah.
I was like, this is a bad matchup. Jose's a great timing, has great strikes. He has probably better wrestling, and his jiu-jitsu is world class. People forget about that. I go, this is a bad matchup for Conor. And then sure enough, he gets that right on the kisser.
It's that hook right away, right? Yeah, no, he had some great performances. I'm not taking it away from him. I do think he's a great fighter. I just want to put him in the list of like the greatest of all time. But I think he's a great fighter, and he always had the holes with the ground, and his conditioning was a little questionable. That's what I was fortunate enough to corner Nate for both those fights. The first one, I think Nate had a 2 or 3 weeks notice, but he was able to go out there and break Connor, because I don't think Connor never been pushed like that. So I think it was the second round. All of a sudden, you could see Connor. You see look in his face when he was just throwing on Nate. He was the one fading, not Nate, and that was you could see it turn around in his eyes.
Have you ever you trained a little bit? Well, obviously you're training on the West Coast, but did you ever get a chance to train with oh my gosh, Ben Askren?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, he came out and trained me for like a week one time. He's a fun guy to train with.
Yeah.
Great wrestler, obviously, cool scrambly, lots of cool stuff.
So, do you think there's ever going to be a time where we see you boxing one of the Paul brothers?
Sure, for the right pay, I'll hop in there.
Oh yeah, I think that everyone's getting those paydays. I was really surprised to see the Woodley. Did you watch the Woodley fight with him, either the first one or the second one?
Yeah, I watched the first one on TV, and I was out there at the last one. I cruised out there with out there with Nate. So we were actually we left right for the fight, to be honest. So we were at the fight, but we didn't catch the fight. But I saw the clips of him knocking him out.
Yeah. What did you take away from that?
I mean, he said he didn't watch the whole fight, but the kid's got power. I mean, you can't you can't knock him. He doesn't suck at boxing. he's also done a good job of picking his fights. He's getting guys that are smaller than him, guys that are past the peak of their career. Woodley was a good boxer, huge power puncher, but he's ways past his peak. I mean, he's a guy I fought. He's clearly way past his peak. And even in MMA, he's a huge one-off power shot puncher. He looks for those one-shot knockouts, which doesn't transfer over quite as good in the bigger gloves. 4-ounce glove, you put him down, but what do they fight? 8 or 10-ounce gloves, so it makes it a little bit harder for those single shot knockout punches. So he picks his matchups, and he has about 20 pounds on him. But that being said, he's not a bad boxer.
That I forget which it was. Jake Paul had mentioned a couple of times that he wants to come and do MMA, and he's talked to Dana and said, "I'll come fight in the UFC." How do you think? I mean, there's so many people licking their chops to like, oh, could you imagine getting a call tomorrow? Like, here's $1 million to go fight him. Like, do you have to train? I mean, I heard he's a decent wrestler, but like, do you think we're gonna see him make an MMA debut? And if so, do you think it lands in the UFC?
That's hard to say. I mean, he's definitely interested in it, but there's a lot to learn. It's a big transition, and the UFC generally doesn't bring in guys that aren't that good. There's been a few guys they brought in, but even like Kimbo, they didn't bring him in until like they made him do the reality show. They brought in some pro wrestler that wasn't that great, but again, he lost his fights. They didn't really give him easy fights, so it'd be hard to see how the UFC is going to match him up. So they could maybe make more sense to Bellator because they'll give him fights he could win.
They just have to have him fight like 5 Hezbollahs, and then it'll just be perfect. It'll be the freak fight of the year. Right. So it's ironically, I was talking to Anik, and I said, "Do you think we're going to have a Jake Paul a UFC fight?" And he was just adamantly that they wouldn't, but he did think that there was a slight possibility. And I couldn't tell if he was joking or not, but I believe that like the Hezbollah fight possibly could be that I would like, come on, are you not buying that? Hilarious. Are you not buying that pay-per-view? Like for sure. I want to see Hezbollah two little people fight. It would be freaking epic. Yeah. I mean, that would be great, man. So what's next on your docket? You've been fighting off and on, doing jiu-jitsu. Are you coaching? Are we going to see more Jake Shields MMA, more Jake Shields coaching, or just more in the jiu-jitsu space?
Yeah. I mean, mostly probably just coaching and jiu-jitsu. I've never officially retired. So if there was a good payday and a good opponent, I'd hop in there, but I'm not like out hunting fights. I'm lucky where, I have business opportunities going. So I'm like making pretty good money. So I don't need to step in there and fight. But I mean, all of us fighters, it's hard to truly walk away. It's in our hearts. So we still love it. I still train all the time. I'm training with a bunch of pros. So for the right fight, I would step in there. But yeah, I'm training a bunch of really good guys. I'm helping Extreme Couture, and I got a bunch of tough up and comers. So hopefully I can win some world titles through them, so I don't have to go out there and do it anymore.
Yeah, I think that is challenging, right? Because like so much of identity is formed with like fighting. You spend so much investment in time and effort and friends and life and experiences that you don't get to have because you're focused on this course of action. That like to stop fighting, it's like almost like I felt, like that was like a loss of my identity. I didn't fight, at the top levels, but like when I stopped going to train 2 days, 6 days a week for 20 years, it's like, what do I do with my time now?
It's tough. Like you said, it becomes part of our identity and who we are. We get so used to going out there, the rush of the fight. And that's why I think, being here in Vegas, I was never like trying to train fighters. And luckily I have, money coming other ways, but I just kind of naturally just started going and training. And now I'm still at the gym like twice a day because it's what I love doing. I'm helping these guys out. It's like, hey, I'm training some good guys, so maybe I can go, win world titles through them. It's not quite the same when you're cornering someone, but it's a pretty close rush when you're out there in someone's corner. It feels pretty close.
Yeah, it's kind of like well, you have a daughter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like having kids, right? Like it's not the same, but you get to live vicariously through that excitement that goes back through them. What's, if for some reason the sport of MMA, jiu-jitsu and martial arts is just gone tomorrow, what would Jake Shields be doing?
Man, I don't know. Cause my whole life is entwined with fighting and jiu-jitsu, and it would be tough. I got some few business things going on, but even lots of that have to do with jiu-jitsu. So I would have to restart and find something else I love.
Do you have any, are you into the crypto space at all?
Not really. I mean, I have a tiny bit of crypto, but not much. I wish I was buying that early on.
Doesn't everybody? Yeah. Geez.
Yeah. Especially San Francisco, I had a lot of friends that were, buying crypto. Most of them made money, but sold it too early because they were buying, it was like a couple $100 a Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I think they sold it at a couple thousand. They're like, oh, we came up.
Isn't that crazy?
We just made like 30,000. It's like, if you'd kept holding it, you would have made a couple million probably.
Oh, it's bananas, man. So, seeing the sport transition as much as it has, what's one thing that you would change about the sport, whether it's the front or the back side of it?
Changing, I think it's just, you can't really change it, but the fighters having to deal with promoters and and just the shadiness of that. I mean, that sucks. The weight cutting, I guess, too, because that's really hard to get rid of, though. I know ONE FC is trying. So I'm not really sure. Seems like people like that. So maybe getting rid of the weight cutting. But again, it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, the problem with the weight, you can still game that, like that whole that piss thing. Like if and people learn, oh, it sounds great on paper, and it's like from an organizational perspective. Oh, look, you're doing that the urine gravity test,
hydration
or
the
hydration test. Yeah, but like you can also, like, there's ways, I'm not going to give away the cheat methods, but there's ways to cheat that where people are like, oh, well, that doesn't really make a big difference.
Yeah.
You know, I think that like one of the things that I've always been an advocate for, that even though it's kind of ironic because you really can't, because fighters by nature are not employees, and you can't have a union unless you're an employee, but something that's been tossed around for years, and I'm talking since the first UFC I can think of, is the idea and the concept of a fighters union to kind of protect both longevity, because I mean, you're smart with your money, but there's been a lot of guys that made a bunch of money and then they're back in the poorhouse, man, and it sucks because you beat the shit out of your body. You beat the crap out of your body for years to have nothing to show for it. So things like that, or dealing with those promoters or healthcare. And for me, I'm a big advocate of like, like we see guys that are like, I won't even smoke weed, and then I got injured, I had to do pain pills, and now I'm addicted to pain pills, and now I'm fucked. Yeah. And then the companies are like, see ya, you lost those fights, goodbye. And now they're like, their lives are ruined. You know, like, do you think that there's a way that to formulate some sort of a union or a managers union, or do you think we could ever get enough fighters on the same page to create some momentum?
Yeah, it's just really difficult because, like you said, we're all independent contractors, so it makes it really, really difficult. And then what the UFC does is they put more of the money towards the guys at the very top. And I don't know if they do as much anymore, but back when I was fighting, they would give bonuses quite a bit. So if you don't, if you're not saying anything bad about UFC and stirring up problems, you might be getting some pretty nice bonuses. And sometimes the bonuses could be more than the fight purse, even if you're in a big fight. So it's the UFC made it where guys didn't want to really ruffle any feathers. But I think at this point, they're just such a big organization. They need to pay better. I know, they built it. They deserve to get rich. Dana deserves to be rich 100%, but I think they're paying out, I think someone said around 17% of their money and then NFL, NBA generally pay around 50%. So that gets kind of ridiculous, So even if it wasn't 50%, there's no reason why they couldn't be paying out 30%, 40%. So it would be great if you get all the fighters to go on strike. If all the top guys did it, they'd have no choice.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. Well, hey, man, I really appreciate you taking some time and sitting down and shooting the crap. And if you're ever out here in Florida, man, hit me up. We'll grab a carrot juice or whatever it is you drink.
Yeah, you're up above Miami, right?
Yeah, I'm in Pembroke Pines between Fort Lauderdale and Miami. So either one, man. Good stuff, brother.
Cool. Yeah. Let's hopefully I'll see you soon. So great talking.
All right, man. And I'll make sure not to hit you up when I'm in Vegas, because I don't want to be one of those people like, God damn it, I gotta take Chambers out on the strip.
Yeah, hit me out when you're here, though.
Hit me.
It's a good excuse to go out.
All right, awesome, man. Appreciate it. Take it easy, brother. Good night.
Have a good day.
You too, man.
Bye.
Take it easy.